Blues Matters here. Today, we have a special guest, Rick Vito. Where are you today?
I'm in a place called Leiper's Fork, Tennessee, which is about 25, 30 minutes from Nashville, Tennessee.
And what are you doing there?
Well, I've lived here for about 30 years now. I was in Los Angeles for 25 years prior to that and wanted to live in the country. So decided to move to some place that was nice and green and wound up here.
Right. How does it feel compared to being in the city then?
Well, much more peaceful, and you learn to appreciate nature more, and it's less stressful. And I think you can be very creative just being out here and not being distracted so much.
Is it good for your songwriting process?
Yeah, I spend equal amount of time, or maybe a little more time, practicing the guitar than I do songwriting. But I found a good place to write, and that's in my dining room. For
Right.
some reason, I've written more songs in my dining room, just sitting there with a little guitar and amp set up, than I have anywhere.
Right. Right, let's take you back.
Okay.
What made you want to be a musician in the first place? What's the backstory of?
Man, I got fascinated by that image of the guitar. My mother, when she was a girl, played the acoustic lap Hawaiian guitar. So my grandfather one day brought over the guitar, which had been sitting unplayed for many, many years. And around about that same time is when Elvis and Ricky Nelson and all these rock and roll guys started appearing with the guitar. And I just used to pick it up and bang on it and play it as best I could. And eventually my mother got me lessons. I tried to take lessons for a while. I wasn't ever a good student at learning to play the guitar, but it fascinated me. It always has.
And do you come from a musical family? I mean, is there a lot of music around?
Not really, no.
Uh,
Just my mother, of course, she did play for a short while, but she had a lot of records. And I still have her 78 record collection. And in there, I was looking about a month ago, and I found a, a lot of records by Les Paul and Mary Ford. So she was
Right.
apparently a big fan of theirs. And I found some of the original Bill Haley set back when before he was Bill Haley in the Comets. He had a record out called Rock the Joint by Bill Haley and the Saddlemen. So
Right.
he was kind of transitioning from country western into this more of an R&B influenced primal rock and roll thing. So she had quite a lot of cool records, and I'm glad I have them.
And was it rock and roll that you got into first, or what kind of music?
Yeah, absolutely. Rock and roll. Yeah. So I lived outside of the city of Philadelphia, and Philadelphia had a guy called Dick Clark, who was the first guy on TV who was a DJ a TV DJ who held a dance program every day after school, and he had all the up and coming rock and roll acts on the show every day. So you could see Chuck Berry, or you could see Eddie Cochran, all these people, Link Ray, they were all on Dick Clark's show. So I watched it regularly. And I also watched this show called The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. And they were the parents of Ricky Nelson. So at the end of each show every week, Ricky would sing a song backed up by a cool band featuring James Burton on the guitar. And that was a big influence because I was called Ricky too at the time.
Right. So quite a lot of influences going on right from the beginning.
Yes, sir. Right from the start of rock and roll.
I remember the first time you were on stage.
First time I was on stage was in the ninth grade. I was 13, or maybe just turned 14, I think. And I was playing with some guys who were a doo-wop group. So with 5 guys in long black leather coats with Cuban-heeled shoes and the hair slicked back and singing doo-wop, like early Dion and the Belmonts, that kind of thing. And I played the guitar. I had my first electric guitar, which is a Gibson, and they sang, and I just played at that point. Terrified.
And when was your first band? When did you?
Well, around that time, I tried to put a band together, but it was prior to this, actually, prior to the doo-wop. I had got together with a couple of fellas that we really couldn't play yet. I mean, we knew a little bit of the Ventures or Dwayne Eddy, but it really wasn't a band that ever played for any people. When I got into high school, of course, I had various bands that would play at high school dances or private parties, things like that. and I transitioned into semi-professional and started playing clubs in Philadelphia at 16 or 17.
How did you feel playing the clubs at such a tender age?
Well, all the guys I played with were older than me, and they had
Mm.
go-go girls who were older than me. So I was in kind of heaven, because they all thought I was cute, and I guess I was at 16 years old playing the electric guitar in these bars and stuff. My parents had a club in Wildwood, New Jersey, and we had a little band, my brother on drums and a couple other guys, and when the big guys would take their break on Saturdays and Sundays in the daytime, they would do jam sessions. They'd play 40 minutes and we'd come up and play 20 minutes. And we knew, Rolling Stones and James Brown and, whatever was popular of the day. So it was fun to kind of get a little glimpse into what that was like. And of course, talking to all these older musicians, I got all these wild stories about what went on, and traveling and girls were a big part of it, I guess.
You wanted a part of that then.
Yeah.
And your first big break then, what was?
Well, when I was in college, if you might remember, Eric Clapton, for a brief time, toured with a group called Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, and they had a live record and they had a studio record. And I just fell in love with that music. I thought, well, this is something I really like. Rock and roll with sort of a gospel-y and rhythm and blues and that kind of thing. And so when they came to town, I introduced myself. I got backstage and played them some tapes I had, and they were pretty encouraging. And I did that 2 or 3 more times. And finally, they invited me to sit in with them on stage. And I had my guitar and I sat in. And I knew the music, so I was pretty good at that point. And they kind of turned around like, "Who's this kid?" And I told them I wanted to get into the music business, and they encouraged me to move to Los Angeles. And when I finished that semester of school, I moved out to Los Angeles, and actually they hired me, and I went out on the road with them. So that was my big break.
And what did you learn? What did you learn most?
I learned a lot of things, a lot of things. I learned to be ready so that you could, if you got a shot at something, you'd be prepared for it. I learned about people because I learned that all that is glitter is not gold. People in the music business are just people like anybody else. And when you see that side of people who prior to that you thought of them as sort of idols or whatever, there's none of that going on really. If you want to be in the business, you got to get real and you got to learn to be versatile. And I was watching people around me do drugs and get drunk and stuff like that, and I reckoned that was not a good thing. So I mean, it was an era of drugs and rock and roll and all like that. So I learned to be pretty. I won't say I was a complete teetotaler or anything like that, but I never took it far, and so I think that helped me stay in the business longer.
And after Delaney and Bonnie?
After Delaney and Bonnie,
Yeah, yeah.
well, I met this fella named Bobby Whitlock. Bobby was the keyboard player and vocalist and songwriter with Eric and Derek and the Dominoes, as you may recall. And he, after the Dominoes broke up, Bobby gotten a record deal, and he heard some of my tapes through Delaney and Bonnie, through Bonnie actually. And he called me and he said, "Hey, I'm starting this solo career. I'm being produced by Jimmy Miller, who was producing the Rolling Stones, and I really like the way you play. And so I'm going to do a demo session. And would you be interested in playing?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, there's going to be Jim Keltner, the great drummer who was with Delaney and Bonnie, was the drummer. And who was the drummer? Chuck, it's escaping me now, but he was, top session guy." So we did the session. I was scared to death. And we did this song. It was sort of a rock and roll, raucous thing that had a lot real long sections where it was soloing to be done. So I was allowed to, or be given the opportunity to solo, really stretch out. So we get a good take and we're listening to the playback, and the studio doors open and in walks my two idols, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. And I just didn't know, I didn't know what to say. Or I was completely just bowled over. Song stops. The first thing they both say is, "Who's the guitar player?" And I meekly put up my hand, and me, sirs. So anyway, they gave me the thumbs up and some very nice compliments. So I felt like I could retire at that moment.
How old were
And
you then? How old
pardon,
were you then?
I was 22, just turned 22.
Quite a thing for.
It was going to Los Angeles, and at that particular time was the greatest thing I could have done because everybody came to Los Angeles, if not to live, to record and to work. So it was the place to be. It was the center of the universe as far as the music business was concerned.
And did you get regular spots then?
Well, it was pretty much hand to mouth, but I was
Mhm.
meeting a lot of people, and
Right.
I worked with, Little Richard and Dobie Gray, who was a great singer. Various recording opportunities would come up, and finally, I was contacted first to do by Steve Cropper. I had met Steve Cropper with Bobby Whitlock, and he kept my number for about 3 years. And he finally called me, and he was producing John Prine and wanted to fly me to Memphis to record with him. So I did that. And it just must have been one of those auspicious times in my life because as soon as I got back to Los Angeles, I got a call from my friend Larry Taylor, who was the bass player in Canned Heat. And he was working with John Mayall at the time. And he said, John's looking for a guitar player. I told him about you and let's go up to the house. So I went up to the house with Larry and we jammed on a couple songs. And he said, well, if you want the gig, you're in. So I said, yes, sir. I want the gig. John Mayall was a big influence. Peter Green and Eric Clapton, Mick Taylor, all the guitar players that I admired, or not all of them, but many of them, did a stint with John. I thought, well, that's about as a great a compliment as I could hope for.
What was John like to work with?
Well, John was a very unique guy. He wasn't like anybody else you'd meet. He had a good sense of humor. He laughed a lot. He didn't seem to take anything that seriously, but we got along fine. There was one thing that I wish we had done more of when I was in the band, and that's play more blues. But he was in a stage where he was writing these things that were kind of blues rock and had some of them had funky beats, some of them had more straight beats or country beats and stuff. So it wasn't the blues that he had done previously. So I wish we had done a little more of that. We did do some more of that when we played live gigs, but I wound up touring with him around the world, and I did, I think, 4 or 5 records with him. So, and we stayed friends all the time. And the last time I saw him was February or March, February of 2020 in London. And we did a tribute to Peter Green concert.
Yeah, that was a fabulous concert. That was.
Yeah, monumental.
Talk about that. How you got the gig?
Well, I had been working with Fleetwood after Fleetwood Mac. Of course, we'll get into that, I guess. But after Fleetwood Mac, I didn't see him for a dozen or so years. And finally, we touched base having to do with a record I did. And he really liked this record and suggested that I come out to Maui. And that's where he lived, and with the idea of maybe putting something together. So I did that. And we put together a thing called the Fleetwood Band with Billy Burnett. And we did a couple of gigs, and it didn't really gel for some reason. Something was not really working. And so then we abandoned that, and we put together this thing called the Fleetwood Blues Band. And this was revisiting the music of the Peter Green era of Fleetwood Mac, which I was totally schooled in. I did Peter Green songs all my career, as part of my set. And I just loved Peter Green and his whole approach. And when I saw them live, I felt like that's the direction I want to take. So we did that Fleetwood Blues Band for about 10 years. And then he reformed another version of Fleetwood Mac, which I was not a part of. So I didn't think I'd see him again. But I got a call on Christmas Day of 2019. And he said, I'm putting together this thing for the tribute to Peter. And it's got Billy Gibbons and Pete Townsend and all these, John Mayall, Christine McVie, Johnny Lang. We're going to try to get Jeremy Spencer and David Gilmour. And I have to have you be a part of this. You know this music better than any of them. And I said, well, okay. We worked out our deal and kind of got over what we needed to get over. And I flew out to Maui and rehearsed for 2 weeks there, and then flew to London, rehearsed another week or 10 days there, and just had an amazing tribute to Peter Green. And I was able to do some of his songs, and Bill Wyman showed up and played, and, another of my idol with the Rolling Stones, of course. And it was just an amazing, one of the most amazing nights of my musical life. And I'm glad it was recorded and it's on DVD and CD and for posterity. We were actually going to take it on the road. A little thing came along that halted that, called COVID. So that was the end of the on the road version of that.
Right, going back to other collaborations, Todd Rundgren, how did that happen?
I was working with a fellow in my hometown outside of Philadelphia named Rick Valenti, who was actually the first guy that showed me how to play slide guitar. But he was an amazing harmonica player and vocalist, and he was friends with Todd. He'd been in a band with Todd in high school. So later on, we had a duo that was kind of a blues duo. We sang and played guitar, he played harmonica, and we had an opportunity to go to New York to record with Todd some of our original songs. And we did that at Electric Ladyland studio, Jimi Hendrix's studio. And he was looking around for a record deal for us, which we did not get, but we got a song on James Cotton record. James Cotton, the great blues harmonicist. I kept in touch with Todd, who actually also moved to Los Angeles. So when I went out there to see what I could do, just by kismet, I rented a car, drove down the road, and there was his street. I drove up the road. I found his address. We'd been writing back and forth, so I knew his address. I knocked on the door, and he was home. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I came out to see what I could, what I could accomplish, try to get into music. He said, "Where are you staying?" I said, "I don't know. I'm going to stay at the YMCA or something." And he said, "I have this whole house. I'm the only one here. Stay here, get your, until you find a place and until you get a gig or whatever." And so I stayed with Todd for, I don't know, a month or two, and allowed me to, you know, get some work. And I wound up playing on the first major session with Todd on his Something Anything album. So he was a great guy. He helped. It's like a sort of an angel sort of came along and helped me as I was trying to get started.
What kind of advice did you get from Todd? Did you get any musical advice from him?
No, but observing him, I observed that you could take your craft very seriously, which he did. I used to I remember just sitting in the living room, and he'd spend hours at the piano crafting these tunes that went on Something Anything. And he was very, very serious about his work. And I think that was the main impression that I took away.
Right. Can't talk to you without talking about Fleetwood Mac and your time with Fleetwood Mac. How did that come about?
Well, it started from knowing Billy Burnett. Billy was the son of Dorsey Burnett, and he was in the Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio. So he was kind of carrying on the tradition of this rockabilly thing. And I would see him working around Los Angeles, and we became friendly. And he'd always say, "Man, I love your playing. I got to get you on my records." I said, "Yeah, I'd love to be on your records. I like what you're doing." So I went over to a friend's house one night, John Heron, who's since passed away, but a great friend and great keyboard player and a mutual friend of Billy's. And he was going to be doing a Billy session that night. I said, "I'm going to call Billy." And I called him and I said, "Billy, you always say, I've heard you say 6 times at least, I got to get you on my records. So I'm coming over and I'm playing on your record tonight. And you don't have to pay me. I just want to come. So as it turned out, Mick was the drummer that night. And we spent all night on this one song, and it was great fun. And we talked about the time that I saw him with Peter Green and Fleetwood Mac in Philadelphia and how much I loved that music. Well, shortly after that, he and Billy came to hear me and my band play at a club, and they sat in. And so we played some old Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green songs and other stuff, blues mainly. And so when Lindsay left, Mick wanted Billy, and I didn't know this, but he wanted me. So he called me and asked me if I would learn a dozen of his songs, the songs that Stevie and Chris wrote and played. So I did that, went down, and it all came together. And one day we all, right, just like falling off a log, it all worked. And I did some of the old Peter Green things, and I think that sort of helped my entree into the group. And it was, easy to play the Christine songs, a little more difficult to play the Stevie songs because I didn't really, I wasn't influenced by that music, but I found that I could learn
Mm.
it fairly easily. And I liked the people a lot. I'd worked with John McVie on a John Mayall session,
Mm.
and so that helped too.
Right.
So that was, we rehearsed for a couple months and then went on tour and just, I stayed with them for 4 years. We did greatest hits record. We did a total new record and a couple records, a couple songs that came out on another compilation after that. So it was a great, great experience. I loved it.
And what did you learn from that experience, taking it into your?
Learning how to project on stage was always a good thing. Learning how to put your best foot forward because again, you have to be ready for these opportunities or when they come along, they're going to just slip through the cracks.
Mm.
And I felt that I was ready and I tried to rise to the occasion because this was not a sideman gig. This was joining one of the greatest
Yeah.
bands that ever was. And because of my experience having worked just prior to that with Bob Seger and Jackson Brown and Bonnie Raitt, very top great people,
Mm.
John Mayall. I learned gradually how to step out into the public eye. I think maybe if it had come without those experiences, I might not have felt so comfortable. But as it was, I did feel comfortable.
Right. And then you went on to your own career. What was that? 92 to 92.
Yes. While I was in Fleetwood Mac, I wrote some songs with Stevie, and I would go up to her place and we'd make little demos. And she played some of these demos for a guy called Doug Morris, who was the head of Atlantic Records. And they had a subsidiary label that Stevie was on called Modern Records. So he offered me a deal for a solo record. And so that's how that came about. And so a lot of the songs that I had pitched to Fleetwood Mac, as with everybody came in with a lot of songs.
Mm.
And we were making our uh, completely new record. So I had a lot of backlog material. So those were the songs that I used for my solo record.
Now moving on, you have another record.
Yeah. I
Slide
had
Master. Slide
a
Master
second.
coming out.
Are you talking about my second solo record? Because I missed a little bit of what you said there.
The now, as in 2026.
20. Yeah. Which is most importantly.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I have a record that's about to come out called Slide Master. And I always wanted to do a instrumental record because all of my solo records, I've had 10 or 12 solo records, I always had 2 or 3 instrumentals. So I always wanted to do a complete instrumental record. But what set it apart in my mind was the idea to do all slide guitar instrumentals, with slide guitar being the main voice. And so I found that I had a backlog of about 25 songs. I had songs that had been on records that very few people heard, and I had some new things. So I said, let me pick the best 12 songs, say, that fit together well. And after a couple months of experimenting with various songs, I came up with 12 that I thought went together well, and that's Slide Master.
Absolutely. What made you actually want to record an instrumental all slide?
Well, like I said, I always wanted to do it. I was always
Mhm.
influenced by this one record by Freddie King called Let's Dance and Hideaway with Freddie
Right.
King. I had Hideaway and Stumble and all those great songs. So that was always in the back of my mind. I'd done so many songs where I was so many albums where I was singing as the main voice. And I wanted to try something different. You don't always
Right.
like hearing your own voice all the time. I've heard a lot of singers say that. I'm sick of hearing my
Yeah.
own voice, and it's true. It's good to take a break and do something a little different.
And what about playing slide guitar? When did you first play slide guitar itself?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier a friend, Rick Valenti, who was
Mhm.
mainly a harmonica player, but he knew how to play there was a country blues guy called Son House who
Yeah.
influenced Robert Johnson and Muddy Waters, of course. And he knew how to play Walkin' Blues, which is Son House version. So he taught me that, and I just never put it down. It was all
Yeah.
part of my uh, repertoire was to play slide guitar on this or that. And there's quite a few electric slide guitar players that were doing that in rock and roll and blues, like Jesse Ed Davis Brian Jones and the Rolling Stones, Mick Taylor and the Rolling Stones, you know, guys are starting to emerge like Ry Cooder in the early 70s. So I thought, well, this is a good time to like explore this. And so I always played slide through my professional career on some of the songs that I was working on.
So talk about the making and the producing of the album. Where was it made?
Various places, because it's a collection. It's not all new songs. It's
Yeah.
a lot of new songs, mostly new songs, but some of them were recorded in various studios with some were with my band that I used to travel with, Rick Reed and Charlie Harrison. And some, you know, to get the live sound, you want to record the drums live on a lot
Yeah.
of things. So I used a guy named Lynn Williams and another guy named Charles Johnson in various studios, and I'll take them home. I produce myself,
Right.
and I have my own setup here at home, and I can overdub uh, till I feel comfortable, whether it's vocals or guitars. I do play bass on upright bass on some things, so it's I can kind of have creative control on a lot of it.
And some of the tracks, new song, the Vegas Jump.
Yeah. That's my old touring band, Rick Reed and Charlie Harrison, and we recorded that quite a few years ago. Sometimes when you revisit these things, remix them and remaster them, they take on a completely different feel and voice. So that's what I did on that one, and I think it came out really rocking. Lead off track.
And Steal Away.
Steal Away, the original song was recorded as a vocal with a guy named Jimmy Hughes in Muscle Shoals. If you ever watched the movie Muscle Shoals, Rick Hall, the big producer, talks about that song. And that was the very first hit that came out of Muscle Shoals was Steal Away by Jimmy Hughes. And I always loved it. And it was cut by Etta James and various R&B singers throughout the years. So I just thought, oh, it's a great one to give a shot to. Because what I try to do with the slide guitar is give it as much of a vocal quality as I can bring into it. So blues music, opera music, and R&B music seem to lend itself well to uh, that whole approach. So this was one of those songs where it seemed to work.
The Big Beat.
The big beat is referring to Bo Diddley's beat, you know.
Yeah.
So I always was a big Bo Diddley fan. I didn't know what to call the song for the longest time, but it just came to me. That's the big beat. I was going to call it Bo's beat, but
Yeah.
that was a little obvious. The big beat is what everybody uses, shaving a haircut beat, some people call it. You know, I loved Bo Diddley, and it's just another opportunity to use that rhythm.
The Danger Zone.
The Danger Zone started off as a vocal, and I never got it right, but the danger, it was in reference to, again, I wrote it during COVID because it seemed like the world has turned into a danger zone. You couldn't do as much as you used to be able to do. You couldn't travel. You couldn't do this or that. But then I never really was happy with the vocal, and I thought, could be a good instrumental. So I worked it up as an instrumental, and it did work. It's sort of influenced by Otis Rush, and Otis Rush in turn influenced Peter Green. Peter Green in turn, both of those guys really in turn influenced that song.
And Red Hot Baby.
Red Hot Baby, another one with Rick and Charlie from long ago. And again, I added a fresh new guitar to that one, and used the track from the song that we had cut years ago, and came off pretty good. Remixed and remastered.
And you got Albatross.
Albatross, yeah, that's the Peter Green song I've been playing through the years.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because some people know it here in America, but not that many. Whereas you play it, if I go to England and play or Germany and play, I'll see people sniffing and, it
Yeah.
meant a lot to them. That was, it brought back a very nostalgic memory for them and quite emotional for some people to hear it. And I've always loved it. And I've probably played it 1,000 times.
What does that song mean to you?
It sort of encapsulates what Peter was doing. What he was doing was he played from the heart and the soul. Where at the time we had Jimi Hendrix and we had Jeff Beck and we had Mike Bloomfield and Alvin Lee, and all these guys who were really, really stretching out, playing fast and furious. And Peter could do that, but he also could just play from a very deep place. And like I said, when I saw them play in Philadelphia when I was 19, that impressed me so much. He was a great band leader, great singer, and great songwriter. And that's one of his great songs, maybe his greatest. And I feel like every time I play it, it's a little bit of a tribute to him. And I worked out an arrangement where it's all done on the slide guitar, where the original version was he and Danny playing the lead lines in tandem, and Peter had some echoes that he played on the slide in the background. So this was a completely, not a different arrangement, but a different way to play it on the slide.
The slide makes it sound really different from the original, from anything else.
Do you think it works?
I think it does. I think it does. I mean, I've heard it a lot of times. I put it on quite a lot, and
Yeah.
compared it to what I usually hear. Yeah, it does. I mean, the first time I heard it, I thought, but no, it does definitely work.
Well, you can't top the original.
No.
Didn't want to top it. Wanted to pay
No.
tribute to it.
Soul Shadows.
Just
Where
one of
did that
mine that
come?
I came up with,
Mhm.
creating totally in the studio. And I think I had Charles Johnson probably played on that, and then I overdubbed the rest. I think there might be a little bit of a Peter Green
Mm.
feel to it, or Otis Rush. I love minor key songs, that sound like a broken heart, and that's what that was or is.
Which goes nicely into the next one, Slide the Blues.
Yeah, that's Rick and Charlie again. Just when I play the blues, I try to play it and have it sound like me. So I'm not trying to sound like Eric Clapton or anybody else really. I tried to make that sound like the way I play, and the blues, three chords. It's a good opportunity to express yourself, hopefully in an individual way.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what your take on the blues is. What does blues mean to you as an artist?
Yeah, it's all about the feel, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
about the feel, and there's so many ways to approach it.
Mhm.
And, I hear a lot of younger guys that are playing it, and it doesn't ring true to me. So it's something you have to dedicate yourself to, and it's not everybody can do it. And so I try to bring something to it that's both authentic to a certain point and original to a certain point. And if that succeeds, people like that, or they feel that it's successful, then I've accomplished what I want to accomplish. It's really some of the best music. It's deceptively simple music. People sometimes, you listen to B.B. King and they go, "Oh, he's playing so simple." Well, listen to what he did in 1954. Tell me if that's simple, or 56, those late 50s things. And he's singing like nobody's business on top of that. It's not all simple.
And a change is going to come.
Yeah, well, I've always loved Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson, probably my two favorite soul singers. Both of them came out of gospel. So that's where they got their feel. And again, it was an opportunity to try to do something, because I'll never sing like either one of those guys, but maybe I could create something that had a feel, that had its own voice. So the change is going to come just represented something that was just completely soulful in its original message, and the melody is completely soulful on its own. And I kept working at it until I got a sound that sounded like vocal. Really sounded like as close as I could get to a human voice. So that's the basis of that. A love for the song, love for Sam Cooke, and a chance to try to bring some of that soul to my own playing.
River of Blues.
Sorry?
River of Blues.
River of Blues. That's the only acoustic slide guitar
Mm.
song on the record. Just wanted to do something that I tried a really special tuning that I worked out, and it had a little bit of a spooky sound, a little bit of an Eastern flavor to it. And while still holding true to the blues format strictly. So it's not a 12-bar blues or an 8-bar blues. It kind of changes whenever it feels like changes. And I did that track completely by myself. I played upright bass and percussion and
Right.
everything.
Yeah, the first time I heard it, it sounded like a zither.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny tuning. I've two of the tunes are droning.
Yeah, what kind of tuning is it?
Sorry.
What kind of tuning is it?
Well, it's a takeoff on an E tuning that, and
Mhm.
I think I doubled the B or I doubled the G string. I can't remember. I did something on the G string that was a double of something. It was a while ago, so it doesn't immediately come to mind, but that's
Hmm.
basically what it was.
And the Peter Green track, The Supernatural,
Yeah,
just brilliant.
yeah. That was a challenge because some of it was played with a slide on my finger. Some of it was played. I have what's called a fretless guitar. It has no frets, so you play it with your finger, but it sounds like a slide guitar. So then you have those high sustaining notes. So there's actually three sections to playing that song on my version of it. And, you know, use the old Les Paul to get the sustaining parts and then a combination of the fretless or the slide or both for the body of the song. And again, it's just another one of those Peter Green songs from the Hard Road album, John Mayall, that I always loved. Thought I'd try a take of it, and it seemed to work for me.
And then finishing off with a version of the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah, yeah. I heard a couple different singers play it and sing it in church, and I heard Mahalia Jackson sing it on video, and I heard what's his name, Mario Lanza sang it in a movie. So I always loved the melody, and I've done several, I guess you would call them religious or gospel, spiritual songs played on the slide guitar. So that one made the cut. I thought I'd finish up with it and just, you know,
Ah,
as a
terrific.
sort of a send off prayer to the record.
What are your hopes and fears for the album?
Fears?
What are your hopes and fears
I don't
for
have
the album?
fears. I don't have fears.
Good.
I just hope that it'll reach more people because, you know, these days, who understands the record business? If you do, please tell me what it is. I don't know. So all I know is I put some blood, sweat, and tears into making the record. I love the tracks that I've wound up with. I'm investing to get it out into the world so that people will hear it. And whatever happens, happens. You know, if nothing happens, I'll have had the pleasure of recording it and working with the musicians I worked with and record company people that I've worked with at Mojo Records. And you know, I'll feel satisfied even no matter what happens. So I hope it does well. I feel it's like anything else in life, you know. If you feel that you've put your heart into something, you've done the best job you can, then that's a success in its own right.
Had.
That I've had. Stick with it.
Mm.
Stay with
Mm.
it, you know. Don't give up. Because if you give up, you'll never know what could have happened. If you don't try, you'll never know what you
Mm.
could have accomplished. And it's discouraging. Make no mistake about it. You want to have a career in the arts, I don't care what it is, whether it's painting or acting or music, you're going to have ups and downs and you're going to have to learn to live with rejection because you get a lot of rejection and you get a lot of people who will criticize you and a lot of people who will reject what you do. And so you have to sort of push that aside and keep going. And it hurts sometimes. Sometimes you don't want to keep going, but that's the main thing. And I've been doing this now for professionally 55 years, and I still love it, and I'm still going, and it still thrills my heart and soul to do it. So that's okay, right?
Yeah, that's okay. I was going to ask you what keeps you motivated.
Well, I couldn't live without it.
Hmm.
You know, I couldn't imagine life without my friend, the guitar, and getting to play in front of people and to get to
Hmm.
sit in my dining room and write songs and practice. I love it. It's a part of my daily life, and I couldn't imagine life without it. I hope I can always have my guitar to play and be able to do some kind of music as I'm, you know, my time on earth, you know, because it's just in itself, it's a self-motivating thing.
And is there anyone that you haven't collaborated with that you would like to?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I don't know if they're alive.
Mm. Okay, dead or
Cer
alive.
Certainly a lot of people. Peter Green comes to mind immediately. BB King, I have some great songs I would have loved to play for BB King. You know, there's so many blues artists who have passed away that that I would have loved to have done something with. It's just I don't know. And I'm sure there's someone alive. There's got to be, but you know, my mind immediately goes to the people who have passed on for some reason.
And what about the future? What lies ahead? Any tours coming up?
No tours coming up because I sort of I'm put off of flying, to put
Right.
it mild, to put it blankly. If this record generates interest in people wanting to see me play, I could change my mind about that. Or if it's venues or festivals that I can drive to,
Mm.
uh, then probably I'll look more into that. At the moment, I don't have that as part of my plan. My plans are just to keep recording and writing, and you know, I have a volume 2 practically finished of
Right.
instrumental slide guitar tracks, and probably another record worth of material in the can. So I've got a lot of material that I'd like to see released at some point. That'd be great.
And have you anything from the road that you can tell us about?
Anything from the road that I can tell you about?
Yeah, any stories you can tell us about?
Well, there's one funny story. I'll try to make it as brief as I can. I got a call from when I was a young man, guy that I knew played with Little Richard, and he had to gig hosting the Midnight Special, which was a TV show at the time, very popular in the 70s. But my friend couldn't do it. He had to go out of town for his family or something. And he asked me if I would substitute for the TV show and then do a week in Las Vegas and a week in like Lake Tahoe with Little Richard. So I said, yeah, I'm up for it. You know, I like Little Richard a lot. So Little Richard called me and he said, yeah, do you know my music? I said, I've known your music since I was a little kid. And I still love it. I love it. I know all your songs. He said, great, come to rehearsal. So I rehearsed with him for several days. It was all great. And the day before the show, he said, well, you got to go to this guy's place and get fitted for your suit. I said, what suit? He said, your Little Richard suit. I said, well, I have a beautiful black velvet suit I bought on Carnaby Street in London. I thought I'd wear that. And he said, no, you got to wear a Little Richard suit. So he sent me to this guy's place and the guy opens the closet and it's like a rainbow of these silk and satin spandex jumpsuits. And he pulls one out and he said, this is what you got to wear.
Mm.
And it was cut to the navel, you know, and big long collar, you know, nothing like I would have ever worn. So I was humiliated and I got Richard on the phone and I said, Richard, you know, I can't wear this. This is like, you know, the brothers would wear this
Right.
kind of clothes. I can't wear this, you know, this is not me. And he said, Rick, no suit, no show. And
Oh,
well, I was living hand to mouth at the time, so I needed the money. So I went and did the midnight special in this lavender spandex jumpsuit. I figured, well, it's only one time, you know, a lot of people see it and that'll be it. They'll forget about it. And then flash forward to 25, 30 years later, somebody comes up to me and he said, did you ever play with Little Richard? I said, yeah. He said, I saw you on YouTube. So you can see me in my purple jumpsuit backing up Little Richard on YouTube,
oh, I'm gonna look for
hosting the
that.
Midnight Special to this day.
Brilliant. Right, well, it's been great speaking to you, Rick.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Really good.
Thanks for the interest.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome, and I wish you all the best.
Wonderful album.
Thank you very much. I hope I get to come back to England someday,
I hope so.
or Great Britain, I should say, because it's great everywhere over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, thank
All
you.
right. You take care.
And you.
Cheers.